is your own engagement and kind of leading by example with the material that you work with and the implications of this material, is that enough for you? How do you get students to take the ethical implications of humanities education seriously? Because you probably do think that there are ethical implications to the work that you do. How do you get students to engage with that and realize that?
To go back to something you just said or just suggested, and Alison was just talking about it as well. I mean, these texts were written to move people. You know, it's Aristotle's problem with catharsis, and what happens about performance moves people too much, and what effect does it have? I think one of the starting places is to simply address the fact, a common perception that literature, culture doesn't matter, or it's window dressing. It's incidental, and therefore it's superficial. More than anything else, these texts were written out of a passion that humankind had to represent itself back to itself, and therefore it was always implicitly a social situation. These things were done, represented, written, drawn, whatever, to affect an audience, to have an effect on an audience. So to think that simply sitting and reading a literary text doesn't have an effect, that's simply, from my point of view, wrong-headed. And therefore literature matters at the most profound level in the sense that it always wants to have an impact on others. But because it does, and you know, this is also a common argument in literary theory, as fiction, it's not telling the truth, it's not speaking reality, or so forth and so on. All the more reason for us to address or to think about the ethical implications of what literature is attempting to do, what effects it is attempting to have, and how it's attempting to persuade or to ask an audience to think differently, and very often to think differently about the status quo, which makes it transgressive and rather powerful politically.
Yeah, I often use as a starting point Elaine Scarry's on beauty and being just, in which she asks, does your generation want to be remembered as an art-loving or an art-hating generation? And of course students say, oh, of course, art-loving. I wouldn't want to be remembered as the culture that hated, as the generation that hated culture. So I said, well, what would that look like in practice? What would it mean to be an art-loving generation? So to get them thinking about their own commitment to the protection of and the promotion of the arts generally, but also in the classroom, for me it looks more like cultivating relationships among students. So for instance, having them read each other's writing, comment on each other's writing, appreciate each other's points of view, so that they view themselves as agents of culture, producers of writing that can be very beautiful, whether it's creative or critical. So to invest at the level of the sentence with each other, rather than simply writing for my approval, and to get them talking to each other as much as possible, I think is my way of promoting that kind of ethical constituency within the classroom.
And that's something that, I mean, is much more easily facilitated, I think, in some ways by the structure of like graduate seminars. But do you try and implement that in any undergraduate courses you teach as well, or do you find that there are some things that maybe prevent you from enacting that at that level, or limit you in what you can do to promote that at that level?
Well, I teach fourth-year seminars, and I like them very much because they are like a graduate seminar. So the students can do the same kind of work, and in fact are sometimes better than graduate students at undertaking the work collaboratively, because they're not in competition with each other or don't feel that they are. And but even in an honor seminar, which is usually capped at 50, I still have students reading each other's work. I circulate papers that they've written so that we can discuss them as a class, and they can appreciate someone else's efforts, whether it be a B paper or an A paper, and we can work on it together. So I build it into all of my classes.
We were talking earlier about this culture of leadership course that I'll be doing this September, which is offered between arts and humanities and pitched specifically towards biz students, as it were, humanities course pitched to biz students. And I have not been comfortable working outside the box of the traditional essay format and teaching writing skills and so forth and so on. And increasingly I'm beginning to see that that's a really narrow point of view in terms of how knowledge is imparted to students and how they evaluate their own work and how they think about the quality of the work that they're doing. So we're going to be incorporating a variety of service learning-based assignments, one of which will be to adopt the case study model that's incorporated essentially as part of the BISCO curriculum, and to think about how that could be parlayed into thinking about the work of leadership, the morality and ethics of leadership, as it's represented through various works of literature, television shows, films, so forth and so on, part of which will be to get them to go out to the community, to interview a leader, someone whom they see as being a leader and a citizen in their community, whether it's London or their hometown or whatever, and to somehow incorporate that biographical material, that road mapping of that person's life, incorporate it and think about it in terms of the literature that they've been reading and the criticism that they've been asked to read in the course. So that's just one way in which learning will become hopefully made to seem more relevant to them in terms of its